All right, well, welcome back to Construction Conversations. I'm here with my co-host Lars. Lars, how you doing, man?
Great, buddy. Thanks for having me. Thank you for being on board today.
My pleasure. Good to see you guys.
Yeah, we're here with Nitin, CEO of Planera. And if you've ever been frustrated with scheduling, this is a good episode to tune in because we potentially have a solution for you. But Nitin, where are you calling in from?
From Pleasanton, California.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I think, in one of our conversations, Nitin, we've talked about kind of the parody that is a lot of the kind of founder stories at times in the construction tech kind of industry, which is it's either, a domain expert, hey, like I came from the field and that's pretty self-explanatory, or it's someone that's not from the industry, but then they try and kind of parrot the founder story of those with domain expertise. And so they'll reference like I have an uncle who owned a GC, and so I know construction. But one of the things I appreciate about you and our conversation is you're not necessarily from the industry, but you kind of own that, and you're willing to talk about how you're leveraging kind of team building as kind of your secret skill to building a team in the industry. So I'm stealing your thunder, which is not great as a host, but yeah, can you kind of go into how you found your way to Planera and the construction industry?
Absolutely. Yeah. You're right that there is a sort of a sense of a narrative that you have to come from the industry to do something meaningful for the industry. And I don't necessarily believe in that at all. I'm a third-time founder. Fortunate enough, both my previous startups have done well, and they were both in somewhat unrelated industries. And the common thread there has always
Amazon
been
delivery.
Amazon delivery.
This is it. This is it.
We
He
nailed
warned
it.
us. He warned us, ladies and gentlemen.
Give me 1 second, guys.
Just go for it.
That's
Go.
great. I love that. I mean, that's a good bark on that dog, right?
I have a feeling the dog's like 8 pounds.
Yeah, it's not a huge. Oh, yep, there it is. All of this is going to stay in the podcast.
Are we also going to talk about that? You're doubling as the Tom Selleck lookalike at night.
And my short shorts that you asked
Yeah,
me to
your
wear.
short shorts. Your baseball team.
All right, so Nitin, go back. What did you get anything interesting from Amazon? Hopefully.
Yeah.
Not probably.
Dog treats. So when I'd sold my second company, I stayed at the acquiring company as an executive, thinking about what to do next. My very good friend for 10 years, kids go to the same school. He lives 3 houses down. We'd always hang out at parties and have a good time. We never talked work. But then he's like, hey, looks like you're going to do another startup. And just give me a few days to explain to you my frustrations. And I'm like, great, I love to learn about new industries. That'd be fun. And so I started understanding his frustrations. He runs a civil engineering GC firm. They do really complicated projects. Bay Area, BART,
Sure.
BART retrofit, where every night they have to go in with a custom locomotive, retrofit some tracks, come back out before trains can run. Complex projects, right? And he was just totally frustrated of how schedules weren't being used to build his jobs better. And he had a very smart scheduler and staff, but he wanted his PMs and supers and everybody who knew the job to interact with the schedule. And that just to me felt natural. I mean, like, why would you hire all these smart people and not include them in as part of scheduling and planning? That just didn't seem right to me, right? And so my journey started off as learning that, and then telling him, well, give me 2 weeks, I'll find you a solution. It must exist. And 6 months later, I was down deep in the rabbit hole, talking to all his peers. And then I said, oh, well, you're kind of a mid-sized company. I'm sure the big guys have figured it out, right? And then talking to them, and it was just an eye-opening experience. And I took my time, but then I got conviction that this is a big problem in a big industry that needs to be solved, right? And so that was my sort of like my indoctrination into this space. It didn't happen overnight. It took its time, but that's the fun part. I always tell my wife, I'm glad I'm not a heart surgeon, because then I'd be operating on hearts all my life. I'm a software entrepreneur, so I can, sort of every 5 to 8 years, I can learn a new industry and solve some big problems there.
That's
like that.
fantastic. When you were doing your research with the different size firms and the different solutions they were using, what was the common thread you kept hearing? What was the pain of the companies that you were sort of dealing with? What were they telling you?
Universally, what they were saying was projects have gotten complicated. They have way too many interdependencies. Even if you think of pre-con, pursuits, right? Just start with pursuit schedules, right? Gone are the days where you could just kind of approximate things and come up with a good proposal, right? People are looking for very thoughtful proposals. Depending on a delivery method, either it's going to cost you a ton of money or at least it helps you make a better proposal. Pre-con's gotten complicated. Construction, there's just stuff happening all the time. Universally, what we heard was, we're not using our schedule to run our jobs better. We're just doing it because we're required to do it.
We're meeting the requirements. That's it.
We're meeting a compliance requirement, but we're running the job in Excel.
Yeah.
Or a whiteboard with stickies. And
Yep.
and that was the kind of the universal truth of it. They might not articulate it the exact same way, but that's my job, right? I'm an investigator, right? So when you investigate, like, end of the day, the bottom line was they were not using their schedules to make their business better.
Yeah.
And that to me felt like a huge opportunity, right? Like it's one of the three sort of legs of a stool, right? Like, you got to have great design, you got to have great project execution platform, and then you got to have a good schedule and plan, right? And that third part has just been ignored and neglected for way too long.
Yeah.
What, again, for the listeners, I've got a lot of experience in scheduling and a lot of pain and lessons learned around scheduling, and can't wait to get into some of that. What platforms were you seeing people utilize and then really sort of share that pain? I mean, I'll say one. I mean, I was forced on a lot of jobs to use P6, and to your point, that was administrative. And then guess what my super is doing? Like a 3-week, 8-week look ahead on Excel. Like, that's it, right? That was the setup.
I think that's probably the most common tech stack, right?
Yep.
There's variations. If your job's not too complicated, maybe you use Microsoft Project.
Project.
Right? Project's cloud version isn't going to support even basic things like critical path. So that's not a viable go forward strategy. And staying on-prem is obviously not a very viable go forward strategy, right? And so anything complicated, it's really a monopoly of P6 at the master schedule level, right? You want to resource load things, you want to look at like some sophisticated graphs, F curves, etc. Like you're using P6 as a master schedule, and then your phase plans or your look aheads are often running in Excel or some variation of it, right? There could be smart sheets, there could be some other pool planning tools, but they're all silos, right? They're not connected to what's the master schedule.
And they're not connected, at least in my experience, to the master schedule, is because that was a contractual requirement, right? That's there to meet a specific set of rules or restrictions. And in this case, certainly it was primarily a billing tool and a forensic tool, right? So it was for invoicing percentage complete, and then forensics related to impacts and delayed claims and concurrent delays, and really you own that contractor. And I'll just say, we ultimately ended up outsourcing a lot of our schedule creation, because what we found were the PMs and the supers knew how to schedule jobs, but the software became so complex, so robust, that literally this whole category of experts in the industry now was created to serve the software. So
it's so classic.
And you want to know what? You better not screw it up, because if you screw it up, that's $3,000 a day. And if there's a delay claim and you're 6 months, behind, and you put in that claim or that logic, and then all of a sudden some mistake occurred 8 months ago, you just lost $500,000, $1 million. And it's insane, and it happens so often, people don't know. So I think it's great.
Yeah, it's classic Oracle playbook, right? Build something powerful but so complicated.
Oh my
gosh! Entire
gosh.
ecosystem then of consultants and service providers built around that, right? And it's fine, but I think the industry deserves better, right? What comes to mind is I forget who said that, but she said, like, hey, sorry, if I had more time, I'd write a shorter letter.
Oh my gosh, yes, I think it was like Thomas Jefferson or Ben Franklin. It's Ben Franklin.
So we can say anyone.
Right? Yeah, Steven,
we can say anything. AI will fix it. But it's kind of the same thing with software, right? If I had more time, I'd build easier software, right? Like it takes time. It takes craftsmanship to build things that are easy enough to use, but still powerful enough to get the job done.
Yeah. No, I'm excited to jump in and really see what Planera is about. I was always amazed that, P6 is used to build P7s or warships for the Navy. And it's like, That's great. That's like a manufacturing line. They build the same thing constantly, right? It's like here, it's like I'm doing one-off projects and this massive, a
Yeah.
barrier to entry to overcome. Just even from an SOP standpoint, it's like it's not really set up to like do the same thing over and over with your team. Like it's complex stuff. So anyway, I think this is fantastic. Can't wait to dive in more to the founder story. Go ahead, Stephen. Take it back over.
Well, so I think it would be interesting to understand from your perspective, Nitin. Everyone has preconceptions. I had preconceptions coming into the industry, right? I was a business econ degree coming out of school, and then worked 1 year at JP Morgan Chase and didn't like it. And so then joined my buddy's dad's company in San Diego. And I had preconceived notions of maybe, the industry being a bit backwards and really lacking innovation, all the things that McKinsey writes about, right? But then my eyes were opened in terms of maybe the realities of it. But did you have preconceived notions coming in, and maybe how has your experience informed that perspective?
Yeah, I think that's the advantage, in my opinion, of being a bit of an outsider, is that I didn't have preconceived notions, or whatever notions I had were loosely held, right? Like I'm very inquisitive by nature, and I've surrounded myself with a lot of great construction people. Like I have people who've sold construction tech. I have people on my staff who've been PEs and PMs and pretty much every role you can think of. But then I also have experts who build highly scalable cloud-based software that still this day it runs inside Verizon's network, right? Like, so I think you really need a combination of those two, but sort of not having very strong preconceived notions, I think has served me and my whole team quite well, right? Like there's this saying that it's not what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so.
Yeah.
And so we have sort of like intellectual curiosity is a key pillar for our company, and like strong opinions loosely held, right? Like so we have a strong point of view, but they're loosely held points of view, right? And we can be convinced.
I love what you just said. Are those core values or leadership principles within the company? You said, how are they? How do you hold the line on that?
Yeah. We some people do it like way late with like HR people come and write their values and principles. Being our third startup, we kind of like wrote it in very plain English of like what's valuable to us. And
Keep it simple.
in an interview process, we actually send a candidate those before they actually have a session with me. And
Yeah.
I like to discuss it up front and think we live those values and principles every day.
It is interesting. We've had a number of these conversations now, and like one of the common themes that keeps coming up is intellectual curiosity. The people who do well in the industry are able to, one, have curiosity, but two, that curiosity drives them to approach the industry with humility. And that's definitely what I'm hearing kind of in your approach, which I think is huge. As it relates to Planera, the technology, one of the challenges that founders, even ones that have deep domain expertise, struggle with is just the fragmentation in the industry, right? Are you going to build a tool for the EPC sector? Are you going to build a tool for commercial construction, residential, all the different project types within commercial construction, right? And I still see it today where they're like, no, I'm going to go after the whole thing because this is going to disrupt and it's like, well, maybe not. How have you guys looked at that in terms of kind of informing your product to solve problems in a way that is broad enough, but also grounded enough in the realities of these different fragments?
It's probably the hardest part about a software startup is to find that like focus, and when you tip a particular segment, and then how do you expand, like the sort of the bowling pin strategy, right? You gotta have one bowling pin tip, and then the others will tip from there on. And so our approach was that we knew this is a universal problem. There's yeah, there you go. There
For
you
the
go.
listeners, it's a bowling pin.
Lawrence
I've
is
got
always
one.
ready.
Got a bowling pin.
Lars is a prop guy. He's got to have. That's great.
Exciting part, but also the challenge of something so horizontal is that you really have to be very thoughtful around how you're going to approach it. How are you going to eat the elephant, right? Like a few bites at a time, not the whole elephant all at once. So our strategy was initially we cast a wide net, see what we caught, like, and then try to refine it until we felt really good, rock solid about what's called like sort of an ideal customer profile. And we did that as a combination of the founding team and one sales leader, right? And we were like, we gotta nail this first before we can scale this company, right? And we've nailed that. sort of segment. But even within that, as you know, there's lots and lots of different ways people deliver projects, right? And so you can get pretty narrow initially, nail that, and then we're expanding our use cases. We started with GCs, with certain like sort of mid market to enterprise. We've nailed their use cases. They are bringing in trade partners and subs into the platform to collaborate, which is what they wanted to do all along, but they never could. But now they're doing that. And now specialty subs are telling us, hey, we have this other problem too, right? We have to do portfolio management. Our job, like our start dates keep changing because, we're sort of like a part of a larger puzzle. And we don't have any way to do to enterprise level wide resource management. Great. Now we're starting to move into that, right? And so it's really important to stay very focused upfront. Although in construction, like I hate the narrative of, oh, it's a $12 trillion industry. No, that's not what you're going to attack. You're going to attack a much narrower segment of that and then grow, right? And hopefully you're lucky enough to someday serve the whole industry.
That's right.
But not for the first, 3 to 5 to 10 years.
So I want to go back to something I heard you say specific around the enterprise-wide sort of planning. So collaboration on a single construction project is specifically around scheduling is either done in a job site trailer or, an Outlook email with an Excel attachment. And are you addressing that? Like, are you trying to solve around that and make that much, more of a team sport rather than a coach just sort of dictating things and subs sort of reeling and trying to respond? Like, is that what I'm hearing you say? Like, there's
Absolutely.
collaboration. Okay.
And at both levels, both the office headquarters level as well as the field level. One of my customers told me this, that, hey, planning is something that right now happens to people, not with people, right? And Planera can change that. Right. And so imagine if now planning was happening with people, right? With all the subject matter experts that know where you could trip. You could like, what about this? What about this contingency? What about this problem? Right. And that the act of planning is so important. And there's no point in one or two people doing it alone because no one or two people can know everything that could go wrong in the job. Right. And so we have brought collaboration at the master schedule level, where people may want to not collaborate so much with the trades, but at least their MEP, heads of MEP, their own general superintendent who might actually then own this job and has to deliver it, right? So they don't go like, yeah, this master schedule, like, let me throw this away and let's build everything back in Excel, right?
Let's start over. It's like,
I'm just going to start over.
This cost me $8,000.
No
what
sense
are we
at all,
starting over for?
Right.
Well, you know what's funny
and
is
sorry, go ahead.
No, keep going.
And then once you're done with that, because it was collaboratively done, it's something you can somewhat sort of believe in, right? Of course, the ground truth is different, but you can take a slice of that and then you can do collaborative pull planning with all your actual trades and people like that. Since both these things are in the same platform, when you actualize something on a daily basis in the field, that information flows all the way back to the master schedule. That doesn't mean you automatically accept all the changes, but you have full visibility, but then you also have full control. And so what we've built is a platform that is hierarchical, right? So you can have your level 1, level 2, level 3 schedule, but then you can also have your daily granularity.
Good.
Everybody has full visibility, but then there's full control over what you want reflected in master versus not, right? Because there's all these different contract requirements, owners are different, delivery methods are different. So break the silos first of all, and then make all this information flow real time so you can make good business decisions, but then you're in control over what's reflected in master.
So what I'm hearing you say, and I want to hone in on something that I was always really interested in, it's like, again, this very robust P6 schedule, more of a contractual requirement, yet like going and building it, I mean, things happen to change, right? And we need to pull this over here or bring that back or adjust this over here. So what I'm hearing you say is, do you have like different views based on the persona, i.e. superintendent, PM, sort of like dealing with it? Because, if you put too much administrative items in for a super, when all he's focusing on is just like, what are my lead times? I just want to see my lead times. Like, let me filter this out real quick. Is that sort of that visibility and very ease of use to the different users that are all working in this schedule? Like that sort of filtering and pulling it out.
Exactly. Even simple things like, hey, I'm gonna pull this little section of the schedule. Maybe I have bookends. Maybe I have these milestones. I'm gonna do pull
Yeah.
planning. But instead of throwing away the master, if you bring that in and then refine it, then at least you have sense of what are my critical path activities? How much float do I have in this one? It's not that hard for supers to, once they understand it, to know that a critical path activity is more important than something that has X days of float. Let's give them some credit, like they can understand it. But if the information is all locked up in some random P6 file that they can't ever open, then
that's the
you're
challenge.
taking away that ability to make smart, intelligent decisions.
Right. Right.
And that's going to happen 3 weeks later when some project controls person goes like, hey, why did you do this instead of that? Well, we didn't empower the field to make good, smart decisions.
You're actualizing, like you're creating action around the data, and you're giving them that visibility to then be very fast and smart with it. So I think that's
Well, I
fantastic.
think that's one of the challenges of the last planner movement is without the connection to the master schedule, or the master level milestones, you don't get the visibility to inform the day type planning, right? And so when I was at Whiting Turner, I was a part of an effort where we wrote a white paper that talked about how to connect the CPM to your last planner process via milestones. But even that was extremely manual, right? At the time, I was using BIM 360 Plan to do my last planner process. I was using Primavera or Piece for my master schedule. And then you can't work stream every milestone. And so there's still milestones that are going to be in your CPM. And you ultimately end up managing 4 to 7 different schedules depending on which consumer of it you're talking with. Are you having an OAC conversation? Are you having a trade partner conversation? Are you having an internal conversation, to your point, Lars, around a persona that wants a very specific viewpoint into the schedule? So bringing that into one makes nothing but sense. I think the challenge then is the traditional maybe conversation or question you get is, well, there's contractual P6 requirements. How do you guys work around that?
Yeah. There's two really important questions here. Let's tackle the easier one first. Contractual requirements for P6, right? The thing is, P6 is both a file format and a product. So it's kind of like PDF, right? PDF is both a file format and Acrobat the product.
Yeah.
And you can engage with PDF, the file format, with Bluebeam if you want, right? And so the contractual requirement is, and which is kind of bogus, it usually says P6 or equivalent, but let's assume it's P6. What they want is a P6 file because they might have some workflows that then hence depend on this P6 file, XER or XML.
Yeah. Right.
And we do one-click import export in both those formats, right? And so that helps our customers meet their owner requirements. And maybe for a while they might do an additional QC step. Right? CPM engine of Planera identical to that of P6. Yes, it is. They get confidence. They just export a file and send it to the owners. And so it's very important to understand that to have P6 the file format for compliance doesn't mean you have to use P6 the product. Just like most people don't use Acrobat, they probably use Bluebeam to interact with PDF.
Yeah.
And so that's that part. I think the other thing we were kind of alluding to is, and you said Whiting Turner, great customer of ours, the idea that you can't just always last planner your system to the finished milestone, right? Like it's important. And you also need the high level plan, right? And so there's sort of like a nice controversial narrative, some good soundbite that maybe CPM is dead. Maybe you don't need CPM, but I think of it more like there's a map and then there's the terrain. Right? When you want to go from here to there, you certainly need a map. You're going to come up with the best route. And then there's the terrain, right? And you start going on the route and maybe there's a closure. Maybe there's something else and that's the terrain. And then you have to react to it, right? And you'll get rerouted from here or there, right? And you need both. You're going to get somewhere, you need a map, and then you also need to have terrain awareness, right? And so that to me is like the CPM is the map, last planner is the terrain. And you can't just have one. I'm not a proponent of like CPM is all you need. Yeah, of course you need a CPM, but you also need to empower the fields to sort of do that pull planning, last planner, collaborative, and then they all have to work together. Again, in this example, right, if there's a traffic closure, you're not just going to like randomly now pull plan your way to the destination. You're going to say, all right, here's what happened. here's my 2, 3 options. Now, what's the big vision to get to the finish milestone, right? And then you react to it, and now you have a new plan.
I like that. I mean, it's clear you picked up on quite a few intricacies and nuances around the industry in your short time. But I think one other maybe aspect or perspective from you that would be interesting is you've done this in other industries. And one of the things that Lars and I have talked quite frequently about is just the unique kind of go-to-market endeavor that construction tech requires. And so we're interested to hear your thoughts around you build other businesses, you come to construction, you learn about the territory, you start building a tech tool. Did you know it was going to require kind of the go-to-market motion it has, or what's been your experience there?
I very like on day one, you kind of have no idea. You have to understand the industry to figure out what's the right go-to-market motion. I was fortunate enough to be connected with a lot of good advisors, people who've done it before, build Plan Grid, build Autodesk, go to market, and you just listen to a lot of smart people and figure out what your strategy is. Is it different from, let's say, selling to big wireless operators? Absolutely, it's very different, right? Wireless operators aren't gonna buy software for one cell phone tower at a time, right? You go centrally, you go to their R&D labs, you get it pressure tested, and then they deploy broadly, right? But in construction tech, I think most people will have to sell to a project team first, get successful there. Then maybe you get 3 projects, then maybe you get the whole region, then you get the whole enterprise, right? A very few soft tech would be sold other way, like from central top down, right? Most things are sold this way. So that was pretty obvious to us. It's a challenging go to market, but one we love. It's the most honest kind of people, right? If your software isn't going to work for them, they're not going to just do endless pilots just because they want to do it, right? Like they're busy people. They're pretty clear, frank about things. They don't waste time. So there's a ton of positive things, but there's no getting around the fact that if you're going to build a lasting, meaningful company in this space, project teams have to love you, right?
Yeah.
And you have to sort of land with one, make them successful, and then start expanding from there, right? You could, for a little while, certainly sell software top down that just becomes what shelfware, right? Nobody in the project team uses it. Works for a little bit, but it's not it's a recipe for long-term success.
Lars, did you guys at Herman Construction have any kind of unique tactics around tech deployment adoption, or was it pretty
Good question. One, we were successful in every implementation. I'm trying to think if we can couple everything we chose, we adopted, meaning like it was a very purposeful effort with total alignment. And I think that's probably one of the biggest keys is that message of adoption has to be driven from the top. Has to. I've seen so many companies just peter out because it's like they actually don't know how to implement. They don't know how to adopt something fully. And just because a platform offers 37 training videos and a certification after you watch it, it's like that doesn't really mean anything, right? You have to get it in the daily routine and the behaviors. Honestly, it was so we had something called a hassle log. It's a Bert Harnish scaling up sort of feedback loop. So it's like, what's the hassle? Submit a solution around it. And in that hassle, it was also like, hey, there's an easier way to do this. And I'm seeing other people do this, or I've heard this. And I would get those hassles. I'd go talk to the person immediately. I'm like, tell me more. Or I love your point. Let's figure this out, because they're trying to make their job easier, right? Which kind of translates to, better working environment, right? And potentially more profit for the company. It's like, why wouldn't I listen to this? So, and then all of a sudden you just start pulling on, what the pain is occurring around this singular thing. And I love Nitin. He might be the most curious individual I've ever met so far, but you just start asking more questions, like minimum 5 questions, and you just dive deep into the pain, and eventually you're going to uncover some good stuff. And then once you uncover that, you go to the next office over and say, hey, are you experiencing this too? Oh yeah, it's such a pain in the ass. Why didn't you say anything? So I guess it's leadership has to want to make it better. And I want to be careful with the word better, because that's sort of like an all-encompassing, like easier, faster, stronger, more accurate, right? Like just this whole emotional stack of finding enjoyment in work, right? So, and really tech for me was always, if I'm adopting one thing, it should eliminate other things, right? Like it should make this whole thing more simple. So return time and opportunity back to that individual. And I think with scheduling is such a massive part of construction that I think, and I want to get into the small versus large companies, but scheduling is such a massive part of a good versus not good company that everyone should have access to easy tools that make companies smarter around scheduling or fill in the blank in construction. How can we make this stuff more simple, right? Purpose built.
I have a bit of a controversial kind of take on this hot take, which is to build on your point, Laura, that scheduling is so critical. Like I'm obviously oversimplifying, but for the most part, there's not a lot of proprietary IP in construction, right? Like people
No,
use the same materials, people use the same equipment, people
it's the
establish
second
the same
oldest
labor pool.
profession in the world, Nitin. Second oldest.
Yeah. The IP really is how are you going to build this job, right? Like in some ways, that is the difference between having good margin versus not, is that, right? And then people have so underinvested in the thing that can drive margin in a sense, right? Because everybody really buys from the same, like nobody makes their own concrete, nobody makes their own rebar. Like it's a whole lot of commodity, a whole lot of people, but the wages are sort of like standardized, right? And so the thing that you have as an intellectual property is how are you going to run the job?
I love that similar statement. Listen, sheet of drywall kind of costs the same, right? And so, well, why are my drywall quotes so different? How many hours they put on it, which really translates to quality,
Yep.
right? So that was always something I was always hyper focused on. One, is there a big disparity? If it is, we've got a problem. We need to have a conversation. But then it's a question and/or leveling of expectation around quality. This is the end product. This is what we desire.
And quality, but also continuity of work, right? Like people who use Planera can very easily resource load the schedule. They get these beautiful interactive graphs, right? Which you could do in P6 if you have like 20 years of experience doing it, right?
You gotta have a whole team of consultants doing this stuff. Yeah.
Right. But once you can see that, then you can see, oh, well, I have this dead time in this crew. Like let me try and fix that, because otherwise, that's coming from my margin. Or worse yet, like there's this spike, and I'm gonna find out only like 3 or 4 weeks before that, because that's when I'm doing the pull planning. And now how
It's
am I
also
gonna
like, what do you want to see in your schedule? And then you go make that app. Like you talk about statistics being an industry where you can kind of make anything come true. Like scheduling is an art form where, depending on the story you want to tell, you can go develop a schedule that says that story, right? And so I think, pulling the thread on your previous statement, I think when someone is buying a project delivery from a team of contractors, including a GC, they're buying the collective expertise from that group, right? And so when you're building a schedule in a silo that is a single super, a single PM, a single GC, and not including that collective expertise in a collaborative environment, ultimately, one, that plan is worse, but two, like the IP is less than what is actually happening, because ultimately, someone closer to the work is going to plan the work in a way that makes sense for their business, and it's not always kind of holistically in mind. But I do like that concept of like there's IP in your schedule, which is really an interesting concept.
IP is the only way to make money above the risk-free rate of return, right? Like you want to make money, you have to have something proprietary and something intellectual, right? And that's the IP there.
Yeah, and based on the average profit margin of 4.5%, it's
Not much IP,
not much IP, arguably.
just different IP, just
Different IP. That's right. So going back to kind of the go to market motion, Nitin, there's the ENR 400. I think people often talk about, we're just going to go out to the 400. But if you think about the top 25, top 50 versus numbers 200 through 400, very different businesses, very different setups organizationally, very different piloting exercises. How do you think about those different nuances, and maybe which one are you targeting? You mentioned Whiting Turner, they're obviously one of the big boys, but it sounds like you're kind of building a tool for all of them, or how is that going?
Yeah, I think over a long enough arc of time, it's a tool for everyone. Today, I would say if there was such a thing as ENR 1000 or ENR like 4000, that's kind of like where we operate, where there's complexity. The project has complexity. There's a ton of moving parts. People are already building both CPM as well as, doing some kind of pull planning or field schedule, is happening. They're frustrated with data silos, right? That's kind of like where we shine. There's no reason why a small project couldn't use Planera as well. We now in February announced Planera for EDU, so basically educational institutes. 19 universities now teach scheduling and construction management using Planera in addition to P6. So students use it, right? Their projects aren't that complicated, right? But they love it. We've now actually had inbounds from customers where a student intern said, hey, you need to check out Planera, right? And so it scales down very well as it scales up. But just from a go-to-market perspective, like we touched on the start of the call, right? You have to stay a little bit focused. And so the focus is sort of like that ENR top 1000 kind of a thing. 20 of the top ENR 100s use us, but then we also have a plenty of customers who are like 400. And if there was a ranking, going down to like 1000 kind of thing, right? And so that's kind of where we really shine right now. And the goal is, as a product gets more and more kind of self-driving in some ways, keep going further down market. And I don't mean down market in a pejorative or bad way. It's just like sort of like we want to make it available to everybody as fast as we can. Yeah. But there's just realities of like startup go to market.
How do you deal with, there's maybe a sector of the industry that would argue that the younger generations, maybe of PMs, PEs, are not really learning how to schedule. They're not really learning how to plan. They're mainly learning how to use tools, tech tools.
Use software, right?
Use software.
Yeah.
So you have some market entrants in the scheduling category that are attempting to try and augment this. You got Smart PM, who's providing maybe a little bit of analytics across scheduling visibility at a regional level down to a project level. But as you engage with these companies and these project teams, what's your experience been with just the level of maybe scheduling understanding?
Universally, people want to get better. Universally, people tell us that, hey, we would love for our PMs and our supers to be great at scheduling and planning, right? But the current tools don't allow for them to do that, right? And so one of the goals that we have is democratize scheduling by giving these people superpowers, right? That's a very ambitious goal, which I like, because we can keep growing into that goal for many for a lot of time without actually ever accomplishing it, right? Which is great for a tech startup. So we want to give them superpowers so they can make good business decisions every day. Of course, there's a whole lot of other tools that complement scheduling, which are sold usually to project controls people, which is great. People need checks and balances, but wouldn't it be great if 8 out of the 10 things that people find in project controls were actually found earlier in the process and actually dealt with and handled at the field level? So I'll give you an example. As you're building the schedule in Planera, there's a helpful sort of like a process where we're constantly running your schedule integrity checks. And we're telling you that, hey, here you have a dangling activity. Here you missed a little successor. It'll take you exactly to that activity, right? Not a big 26-page PDF report. It's built into the platform. So you go click, it takes you there, and it suggests how to fix it, right?
Yeah.
And that makes you a better scheduler, right? That doesn't help you think through the job, but it at least helps you a better scheduler from a mechanic standpoint. A customer sent us a story where one of their activities, a long duration activity, was lacking a successor, and it was actually going to end after the substantial completion milestone. We found it for them, we fixed it, the dates moved, but they didn't commit to a bad date, right? Which otherwise would have been found again after the fact, much too late, goes into claims and all sorts of disputes, right? And so This is just one example, but yeah, we're very, very focused on up leveling everybody's skills and making them like give them superpowers in a way.
So what I'm hearing you say is you don't need a third party app to then, export your, XDR file to then, upload it over here to run like a logic check. You're basically getting real time feedback while you're building it. And really you're sort of focused and, you're getting that feedback loop. So it's making you smarter. I think that's fantastic.
I think using a third party tool to just check the mechanics of whether your schedule is robust or not is just silly, right? Like it's another silo. Do you still need a third party tool to do some other business critical things, checks and balances and things like that? Sure. Right. But why would you in this modern day and age, you have to use a third party tool, which again, the PM and the super doesn't have access to. So it's way too late and it's all too adversarial because somebody comes and says, hey, you messed this up. What sort of a company culture does that create, right? As opposed to, hey, I found it, I fixed it. Here, you don't have to find my errors and omissions.
Right. Right.
And Nitin, you made it through almost a full hour talking about your product without talking about AI. So I feel like you should get
He gets a
some
special
kind of
award.
award. Yeah.
We'll send him more dog treats.
I mean, but like, and I made this point at Future Tech to someone, and maybe I posted that, which is you could really tell the companies who understood the problem they were solving by the quantity of AI that was being, or the lack of AI that was being integrated into the storytelling around the product. And I mentioned Clear Story, but I think same with you. There's a deep domain expertise that is existing in kind of your product approach, which, yeah, I'm sure AI, you have some kind of strategy to either augment or kind of add functionality, but it's not central because you understand that the problem is deeper than some general kind of AI infusion is going to add value to. So kudos.
I thank you for saying that. I feel like we're in a very fortunate situation where the problem is so real and we're solving it in a very sort of a way that is resonating with the market where we have a very large business to build anyways. And once we have all this great, clean first-party data, right? First-party meaning it's in our platform, it's clean because we know it's clean. Obviously, we're going to put a bunch of good AI on top of that, right? But it's a better situation for a company to be in than just try to force fit AI because otherwise there's no market pull. Right. And so I find us to be in a very fortunate situation that way. And that doesn't mean we're not going to do something in that space. Of course we will, and we'll announce it when we're ready. Our goal is to at once, like maybe off the recording, we talked a little bit about how my co-founder always says that schedule is either a shield or a sword. And today it's either a shield or a sword. You're either going to defend yourself with it or you're going to hit someone with it. Our goal is to make it into a business decision tool, right? Like where you're making business decisions every day and hence you're more profitable. And so that is, we're already delivering that. And now we're just going to turbocharge that with more intelligence and more AI assisted sort of like alerts and things that you can look out for. But the end goal is to give superpowers to the teams, to project teams. Sorry, go ahead.
So appreciate you saying shield sword, right? It's certainly a weapon or it's a defense mechanism, depending on where it's coming from, right? I've seen schedules be weaponized, right, to support that. Are you embarking on sort of trying to make it not a weapon or not a shield, but I guess, listen, I just always wanted this. I always wanted this future one day where the software could provide intelligence based off of the data that we were putting into it. And here, the schedule has so much incredible data. And then as we update it, it's like, well, is it giving us any feedback, or do we need to get every expert in the company and every subcontractor to spend another 6 hours to do another planning session? Or it's like, well, wait a minute, all of this changes. What about this? Have you thought about this? Like, do you see that, being, again, like a tool that is curious and wants to provide that feedback to the users and to the market? And that's, I guess, what I'm hearing a little bit, or no?
Yeah, no, I think you're hearing that absolutely correctly. I'll give you an example. We have a customer called Big D Construction.
Yeah, Bay Area. Or no, Montana?
No.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, mountain states.
Yes, that's what I thought. Okay, I had it wrong. Yeah.
They publicly said that they're not even fully deployed yet. They're across a slice of their company. and they're saving $1.5 million a year using Planera.
Yeah.
Why? Because we're not necessarily solving their problem. What we're doing is we're early detecting the problem, and we're telling the people that, hey, 4 months from now, you might have this schedule compression.
Yes.
If you tell smart enough people early enough, they can come up with solutions.
Correct.
People are really, really smart. They just don't have the insights right now, right? And by starting that conversations in a very specific way, here's exactly where this problem might happen 4 months from now. They can go figure it out. They can be like, yeah, we spoke to the cell. They're gonna actually get one more crew, or we're gonna do this, or we're gonna do that, right? And as opposed to doing it a week or two before, where you're just all paying through, like it's all eroding your margins, it's causing fade and things
It's
like
just totally reactionary versus proactive, right? And I love it. That's
that.
fantastic.
And so it's obviously working, and we'll keep doubling down into that, right? Like, how can we, first you have to get a really good plan and to get people to collaborate. Then you have intelligence that comes out of it
Right.
all the time.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. No, build the structure for the logic, for the collaboration, and then provide that reporting and feedback and intelligence back to the users.
And that's already 90% of the way there. Then that last little bit of like, should the schedule also automatically solve the problem? Well, it's I don't know if we have the technology right now to do it consistently in the right way. But also maybe it's not needed, because there's enough people in the project team that have the exact knowledge of the situation, then they can figure it out.
Yeah.
Give me, raise the concern, right? Flag it. And then you can provide recommended solutions. But really, at the end of the day, it's like, I'm going to go look out there and say, okay, yeah, maybe, let me look at this a little bit more, you know? So, but
Scenario planning too, right? Like,
Yeah, we do scenario. Exactly. So what we do is we highlight that and then empower you to do a bunch of scenario planning. Then you can say, what if this, what if that, what if this, and then you pick the right path and then move forward from there, right?
And I wanted to come back to me and say, you made the wrong choice last week, and here's what could have. I want live feedback, but that's interesting. I think I snuck in make scheduling great again, but maybe you don't want to hire me for your marketing team because there's some connotations there.
You know, if you're gonna make some of those hats, then send some.
There you go. There you go. So, Nitin, this has been a fun conversation. I know we've got to stop coming up. I want to ask you one last question though, which is, you know, as we look at kind of helping the next generation, I think it's an industry full of folks that are kind of finding their way. Like, I think I always like these conversations to hear how people have come to construction. So if you were to maybe, and we'll do kind of an adjusted version for this, because I want to hear specifically, if you were to start kind of Planera again, do it all over, like day one, what do you think you would do over differently?
Oh wow,
He's like not go on this podcast.
I think I'd probably hire a little bit sooner, hire good leaders a little bit sooner. That's always sort of like the hindsight benefit, right? Which is that when you're going through the storm, you just don't know if this is going to work or not. So I'm a little bit maybe conservative in hiring. Maybe I should have hired a little bit sooner. Maybe it would have accelerated the company a little bit, but no harm done. It's the flip side is much worse, which is you hire way ahead of product market fit, and now you're suddenly way ahead of your skis, right? And so with perfect hindsight benefit, I would have probably started hiring, scaling the team a little bit sooner. But no, you can't get all those decisions right.
Well, Nitin, appreciate you taking some time with us. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure chatting with you both.
This was fantastic. Thank you, Nitin.